President Donald Trump is following up on his January declaration of an invasion at the southwest border by putting military bases at the border on a 60-foot wide strip of land.
So when it comes to the U.S. southern border, opinions have always been divided. Do you build a wall? How high do you make it? But now things are shifting in a major way, and plans are in place to turn most of the border into an active military base, which means anyone crossing it will be arrested for trespassing on a U.S. military installation. But this is happening so quickly that the gangs and criminals exploiting our southern border haven't yet gotten the memo.
I will declare a national emergency at our southern border.
President Trump is authorizing the U.S. military to take control of what you see right next to me, a 700-mile stretch of federal land along the southern border, and turn it into an army base.
These are a major development when it comes to border security and disrupting Mexican criminal networks operating right on the southern border. Border Patrol agents in Tucson, Arizona, sharing real-time intelligence with their Mexican counterparts that led to Mexican forces then disrupting a major cartel lookout site. Mexican forces arresting 4 suspects and seizing a stockpile.
Migrants who cross in this area would likely be put into holding for trespassing onto a military property until the Department of Homeland Security could arrive to pick them up and deport them.
Trump's expansion of troops' border role comes as crossings have plunged in recent months. Just 7,200 migrant encounters were reported in March. That's down from more than 189,000.
So people are trying to cancel the border base, saying it threatens our rights. But what none of the people who hate this idea will admit is that open borders threaten not just our rights, but also our safety on a daily basis. Because it's one thing to have criminals and gangs traversing your country freely using the border to make billions smuggling people across it. But it becomes quite another when those crooks find co-conspirators inside America that help them obtain things illegally, like weapons. Which reveals that if we don't have a border, our rights are jeopardized by the public safety nightmare created by the free flow of whoever, whenever, wherever. It's a bad situation. And proponents say the president is right, we are facing an unprecedented emergency at the southern border. And if something's not done, the country could fall into the hands of criminals who've been making $13 billion per year on America's open front door. Something the presence of a military base will shut completely, immediately, yet is being derided by progressives as a terrible idea. Which is how you know it's probably gonna work. And that brings us to the real reason we need a base at the border. You've got heavily armed criminals entering our country. That's dangerous. Of course we need a military base down there. We should have done this decades ago. But since we haven't, you've got criminals cutting holes in the border wall, driving vehicles through checkpoints, and in the past, they've simply overwhelmed meager border resources with mass stampedes. Just like this. That was the border 1 year ago, but had a base been set up in that very location, that rush, which included members of Venezuela's dangerous Tren de Aragua gang, would never have happened. However, the president doesn't want to take the chance that an event like this ever occurs again, not just by building a base, but as you're about to see, teaming up with Mexico to shut down these criminals before they even enter our country.
Now to the southern border, where U.S. and Mexican authorities are teaming up to crush the scout sites used by Mexican cartels. The rare coordination on border operations between the neighboring countries, an effort to rip out the eyes and ears of the cartels smuggling routes into the U.S. News Nation border correspondent Jorge Ventura live in San Antonio.
Okay, so it's one thing to build a massive, fearsome border base, but it's quite another to actively go into Mexico and stop these criminals in their little hideouts that they use to circumvent all of our border security in the first place. And before we get into what the president's base is going to be able to accomplish, look at these little houses lining various rivers just across the water from southern Texas. From these, smugglers spy on our border, spy on our troops, and then make their move at the prime opportunity. But they don't just sneak into the country from these locations. They use these vantage points to direct smuggling traffic, launch drones, do all kinds of stuff. Plus, these gang members are well armed. They've got weapons, and for a long time, they haven't been afraid of Border Patrol at all, because as you're about to see, there was absolutely nothing American troops could do to touch them on Mexican soil.
These are a major development when it comes to border security and disrupting Mexican criminal networks.
It's ridiculous.
Right on the southern border, Border Patrol agents in Tucson, Arizona, sharing real-time intelligence with their Mexican counterparts. That led to Mexican forces then disrupting a major cartel lookout site.
It's like an army
on the border. Now take a look at this. Mexican forces arresting 4 suspects and seizing a stockpile, 10 loaded magazines, 300 rounds of ammunition.
Now, why do these guys need all this ammunition and all these weapons and these camouflage suits? Do they need to dress like that to sneak into America and make it a better place, as we're told by activists anyone coming into the country illegally wants to do? Furthermore, what do they need these radio communication devices for? The one in this report seems like it has a solar-powered antenna array. Plus, these guys got caught with military-style weaponry. It doesn't look to me like they were going to use any of this stuff to make America or Mexico better places, which makes it pretty obvious why we probably should put a base down here by the border.
And that's exactly why the U.S. is also ramping up their own defenses. Just yesterday, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth visited a newly created national defense area in New Mexico. It's a 100,000-acre stretch under military control, warning that any illegal crossers there will be arrested and detained by U.S. troops, meaning that troops and Border Patrol now are working together under new expanded powers.
We've got drones. We're prepared to detain and interdict. They know we mean business, but they weren't counting on a national defense area. They weren't counting on effectively a military base along the border.
So this is a huge development. We're talking 100,000 acres now under U.S. military control, and that totally changes the landscape literally, because now anybody who enters this area, they're trespassing on an active U.S. military installation. And although people are very upset about the presence of this new border base, if you've got armed invaders crossing into your country whenever they feel like it, discharging weapons occasionally, that requires an armed response that eclipses this criminal activity enough to shut it down and scare it away. And you just heard, now the US is going to have its own drones covering the border. These troops are going to be there to crack down on anybody who touches military property. And since something like this has never happened before, it's going to totally screw up these criminals in ways they haven't even expected. And that perfectly explains why those who are against this idea are now trying to stop it at all costs.
Jump to this. President Trump is authorizing the U.S. military to take control of what you see right next to me, a 700-mile stretch of federal land along the southern border, and turn it into an army base. Now, critics say this is an effort to get around the prohibition on using the military for domestic law enforcement.
Okay, so it's very important that we just stop this one right here, because that's not what the military is doing. If you trespass any military base anywhere in the country, the consequences are the same as what they're going to be down here. The military at its other bases in other parts of America is not engaged in law enforcement. No, they will stop you and arrest you if you trespass on their base, which is exactly what's going to happen here, but they're not out in their communities ripping people off the streets, tearing families apart. You know what I'm talking about. But ironically, if you want to see what a full-blown military occupation looks like, just visit America's largest sanctuary city, where we've had the National Guard patrolling our subways, and they're outfitted with tactical gear, weapons. It's a show of force, and nobody in New York seems to have a problem with it. Nobody's complaining about it. There are not protests. Oh no. But now look at this. We want to do the same thing at the border, and the same people happy about it happening in New York are losing their minds.
We were at Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas, when the Army delivered more than 50 armored Stryker fighting vehicles.
He's checking the BC hitch.
Designed for the battlefield, they are a centerpiece of President Trump's plan to seal the southern border. On a mountain where foot trails have been worn into the hillside, on this morning, we didn't see a single person trying to cross.
Just the sight of the Strykers has turned out to be intimidating for some people. Soldiers told me that they have watched people approach the border wall, see the Strykers perched up there above it, and then turn around and go back in the other direction.
What's wrong with that? That's great. Nobody tried to cross the border. Nobody got hurt. People decided on their own to go back the other way without anything even needing to happen. What an amazing deterrent this is. It's working and it doesn't cost a thing. As no human being needlessly risked their life only to be exploited again once they get inside America and these criminals that brought them in track them down. Plus, this reveals another element of the whole border security argument. It's not enough to just have a wall, which criminals might make holes in or cut or climb over. A wall by itself does nothing unless there is an authority figure on the other side of it, and that's exactly what this base is going to accomplish. But as this is working, the crackdown happening in Mexico is going further than a lot of people expected.
So Mexico and U.S. forces there on the border launching a new operation called Operation Frontera Norte. It's Operation Northern Border. So back in February, Mexico did reach an agreement with President Trump that did deploy at least 10,000 Mexican National Guards to its northern borders to crack down illegal immigration. Now, since then, Mexican forces have arrested over 2,700 people, seized over 2,300 guns.
So here we're finally seeing what can happen when the US and Mexico cooperate to get rid of these criminal organizations once and for all. You've got Mexico working with the United States, using our intelligence to send troops into the right places of their country and disable and dismantle these smuggling centers, arrest people, and root out these criminals, which is going to make Mexico a lot safer. This will be good for the law-abiding citizens of both Mexico and America, stopping the infrastructure that's been fueling illegal immigration and illegal border crossings while enriching the wrong people. And by wrong people, we don't just mean the criminals in Mexico, we also mean the politicians in America that benefit from this.
Will likely be challenged in court. Democratic Senator Mark Kelly said in a statement to 12 News that Trump's plan is a bad idea. Troops can support in emergencies, but this plan goes far beyond that. It risks putting service members in roles they aren't trained for, undermining their readiness for their missions. That's a bad idea and not what we need at the border. Trump's expansion of troops' border role comes as crossings have plunged in recent months. Just 7,200 migrant encounters were reported in March, according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection. That's down from more than 189,000 during the same month.
Okay, so there's a couple of things we have to tackle right here. First of all, this senator, is anyone surprised what political party he's affiliated with? I mean, come on. And what's crazy is that this guy, he's attacking the idea of this base, saying that it's got troops doing something they weren't trained for, but they're not behaving any differently on this base than they are on any other U.S. base. They're not venturing out into their community, policing it. That's not what we're asking them to do. So I don't really see how that argument adds up. But then we hear another argument, which is that crossings are now so low that, hey, maybe we don't even need a base. Maybe Trump's done such a great job already, he can just leave things the way they are. After all, we don't want to have zero illegal immigration, do we? But this ignores the fact that people who are illegally coming into this country, they're at risk from the day they start their journey south of the border until months after they get into this country. This entire time, they are subjects of the criminal underworld. They are continually exploited. They are bankrupted, and this is essentially modern day slavery. These people owe tens of thousands of dollars that they don't have. They're supposed to pay it back. How come nobody's upset that that's going on while enriching criminals?
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth recently visited the buffer zone, saying it's the latest tool employed by the Trump administration to stop what he calls an invasion of undocumented immigrants.
Clear English, clear Spanish. This is Department of Defense property. The National Defense Area, formerly known as the Fort Huachuca Annex Zone, is federal property. Any illegal attempting to enter that zone is entering a military base, a federal protected area. You can be detained, you will be detained. You will be interdicted by U.S. troops and Border Patrol working together.
Groups like the ACLU are opposed to the newly created military zone,
of course they are,
saying troops should not be used to arrest people for regular offenses. warning it raises the potential a U.S. citizen.
Regular offenses. Did you hear that? We're supposed to believe as Americans that illegal immigration is just a regular offense like jaywalking or maybe not separating your garbage correctly, the recyclables from the rest of the trash. Just a regular offense, no big deal. That's how these people look at modern day slavery. And honestly, that's the worst part about this story. You've got millions of people in the clutches of criminals being exploited, and until something's done about it, until law and order take place at the southern border, this is going to keep happening in Mexico, it's going to keep happening in America, especially in sanctuary cities, and the world will not be better off because of what these activists say is just a regular offense. What do you think about that? Should this base be built? Should it operate? Will the next president try and remove it if it's not somebody who aligns with President Trump's vision for the border? Let me know. See you in the next video.